Hey everybody, I'm Eric Mueller. Welcome back to the Eric Mueller Show. Is anybody out there a fan of magic, card tricks, or mind reading? If so, I think you'll especially enjoy today's guest. Now don't worry, even if magic is not your thing, I'm still confident that you'll feel uplifted and motivated after tuning in to this episode of the show. Allow me to introduce Ben Whiting. Ben is an award-winning magician, actor, and playwright turned speaker. As an entertainer, he performed in over 30 countries, had multiple television appearances, and his clients included the likes of Crystal Cruises and Oprah's HARPO Studios. Recognizing his passion for helping others, Ben began focusing on keynote speaking and leadership development. In 2016, he delivered his first TEDx talk and was then hired by a leadership development firm shortly thereafter to deliver leadership training around the globe. Within 2 years, he moved from leadership trainer to senior consultant at that firm. His leadership consulting clients have included international companies like UNiDAYS, as well as Fortune 50 corporations such as Schlumberger. Today, Ben runs his own consulting firm, employing magic and entertainment as tools to teach and inspire corporations, nonprofit organizations, and educational institutions around the globe. Get ready to learn how to connect like a mind reader. Let's roll on over to the interview. So welcome to the Eric Mueller Show, Ben Whiting. Super stoked to have you here today, sir. How are you?
Eric, man, I am doing fantastic. It's great to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you on. And before we get too deep into the conversation here, I hear that you're quite the magician.
Yeah, it's a habit that has completely gone out of control to the point that it took over everything else for a while. But yeah, when I was about, 5 years old, I was just bit by the bug. I tell people I had a very active imagination because I was an only child. And the first time I saw a magician live and in person, it was as if I had found my imagination outside of myself. And not only that, but because he performed an effect in my hand, and that little stack of coins I was holding, it wasn't just a magic trick. It was kind of a promise that everything or anything that I could imagine I could hold in my hand. So yeah, my mom and curiosity drove me to the library. I still think it's 793.8. That's the Dewey Decimal number for magic books in any library.
Sure.
And my appreciation of it has kind of evolved throughout the years, and why I think I got into it and why I still do it now. That reason has changed as I've gotten older, but it's something I always fall back on.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite trick that you like to perform? I know you do a variety of performances, but is there one that's always kind of your go-to type thing?
I don't have a go-to. I have a trick for every situation. What you're going to perform for 2,000 people on a stage is not the same thing you're going to perform for 4 people seated around a table.
Very true.
What I really am into these days is more of the mind reading and mentalism side of things. Spoiler alert, I'm not a psychic. I'm not a wizard. It's all entertainment. But what I like about the mind reading is I always tell people that magic, classical magic, is like classical music. You learn your scales, you play the right notes in the right order, and if you do that correctly, you get the desired effect. Mind reading, on the other hand, it's like improvisational jazz. Yes, I know my scales, but also I have to be present in the moments. I know what I'm capable of. I know what I have at my disposal, and I know what my audience is doing right there in front of me and what they know and what they see. And if I play all those notes correctly, we could have something special. And so what I like about mind reading is it's impossible to phone in. You have to be present and you have to be in the moment. And so I think that's why I like it.
That's a great answer. Do you like Chris Angel? It's one mind freak, mind reader. I've seen him in Vegas. I wasn't really impressed, to be honest.
I don't know him personally.
Okay.
I know friends who have worked with him, and I hear he has a bit of an ego. And I've been to one of his shows, and I also thought he had a bit of an ego. But it could be a choice. It could be a persona, a character that he's trying to play for some reason I don't understand. I won't pretend to be smarter than him, because obviously he's achieved a level of success that few people have. If that's what you consider success to be, fame and notoriety and money. But there are other magicians out there that are a lot more to my taste than him.
Yeah. My fiance and I saw him when we were out in Vegas, I think 4 years ago, and I was a big fan of the show, big fan of his card tricks and some of his, sleight of hand up close magic. So I was hoping to see some of that in the show, but it was mainly just like a bunch of levitating, and it was obviously, he's just being pulled around by strings and stuff above the stage.
Yeah, I mean, Cirque du Soleil is a great show, and they don't have that much of an ego around it. So go see the Beatles Love at where is that? The Bellagio, I think.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. So magic's been a part of your life. You're a performer, you're an entertainer, you're a speaker. So let's walk through a little bit of your journey. So you graduated from Wake Forest with a bachelor's degree in theater.
Correct.
And then you moved to Chicago, where you were going to train as a professional actor, perform as a magician. You got into the Steppenwolf Conservatory?
Yeah, the school at Steppenwolf in Chicago. It's kind of an acting school for people who are exactly where I was, like leaving kind of the educational field and trying to transition into the professional field. And I was very, very excited that I got into that school. But as luck would have it, I was in there from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., 6 days a week. It was very intense training. So it was really, really difficult for me to make money and get a job or hold down a job. Nobody wants to hire someone for those hours. So what I did instead is I started street performing. I was very lucky that the first mentor I had in magic was a man named Jim Cellini. And he was a street performer, not like you would think of in terms of David Blaine, but very old school. He goes on a sidewalk, he builds a crowd, and then at the end of his little mini show, he asks for tips. And that's how, he made his living. That's how he traveled the world. That's how he, raised a family and, bought cars and all these things off of kind of the generosity of others. And he would get shows, working in the corporate market or on television, but it always came from someone who saw him performing on a sidewalk. And I was so lucky that that's how I was taught. So it wasn't a big deal for me to say, all right, well, I can't get a job. I'm not going to not go to my classes because I want to get good at acting. So I just grabbed my stuff and I went on the sidewalk. And for 2 or 3 years in Chicago, the majority of my income came from street performing.
Wow. I bet you have some crazy stories from that experience.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
it's funny. You ask for tips, and you want fives. That's like what you aim for. Every now and then you'll get a 20, but it's not like you can't ask for 20s because not everyone's going to give you one.
Sure.
Just about everyone will give you $1 or change. But some people don't have money, and so they will drop everything into your hat. I got love letters. I got wedding proposals. I got joints. I got condoms. I got, anything you can think of and then some. I got dropped in that hat. And they were all, those little things are just great stories. And my favorite thing was when someone had a dollar bill and it was wrapped up really, really, really tight. You knew that 9 times out of 10, there was something written on it that they didn't want you to see while they were around. Yeah. And those messages could be really funny.
Yeah.
and also very moving.
Yeah. So, and basically just downtown Chicago, is that kind of your main area that you focused on? Was there some
Michigan Avenue,
areas?
right at Michigan and Orleans? That was my spot.
My gosh. That sounds great. I mean, you kind of get that performance experience and, make some side money as well. And, Steppenwolf, what I've researched about it, a very prestigious school. So congratulations on getting in there. I mean, that seems like, do you feel like that was the framework for the person that you've become now as far as the performing side?
Oh, I'm like a compost heap. There's a lot of this stuff that's just piled up that makes me. But without a doubt, I mean, I've been impacted and influenced by every person that I've learned from, and I try to learn from everybody. The school at Steppenwolf gave me the groundwork for developing a craft because I still occasionally will act professionally. There's theater companies that I'm just friends with. I'm very lucky. I don't have to audition anymore. They just call me up and say, hey, we think you'd be good for this. Can you come in and do it? And if I'm available, I do because I love acting. It's like magic without props. You're creating magic simply with 2 people interacting, and you want that to be engaging and moving, and you want the audience to leave changed. And you can do that simply by 2 people saying words to one another. And the craft of acting, I really started taking it seriously at the school at Steppenwolf. And to your point of street performing, I think something that a lot of speakers, actors, anyone who presents more often than not takes for granted is the fact that they have an audience waiting for them. And that audience will stay until they're done, or at least the vast majority of that audience will.
Sure.
Whereas in street performing, you have to go somewhere where no one's expecting a show. You have to stop them, which is the hardest part. And then everything you do and say has to be engaging. because as soon as you're not interesting or entertaining or engaging, they'll walk away. And if they walk away, you can't do the most important thing, which is ask them to then pay you what they think you're worth, and hopefully make a living with that. And I think so many speakers and entertainers, stand-up comedians, don't get me wrong, you have to kind of earn your stripes in any of those fields. But when you learn street performing, you don't take that stopping and staying for granted, like I think some people do if they've never done it.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you get that mindset of you sell a ticket and someone comes to see a show in a theater, I mean, you probably think to yourself, hey, I've got them in their seat, you know. Maybe the effort kind of fades for some performers because they think, yeah, they've already paid their money. If they want to leave, that's fine. But as a street performer, you really got to earn that value.
You do, and I think it's you can't blame people because they've just never experienced it on stage. But like,
sure,
you realize, especially when your bills depend on it, like, oh shit, people are walking away. What am I gonna, like? I gotta change something. I have to say something funny or do something amazing or find a way to engage people, because if I don't do that, they walk away, and it gets in your DNA. And that's the other great thing about street performing is I cannot tell you how many god awful shows I did on that sidewalk. But you have to kind of crash and bomb a few times to figure out what doesn't work, and then you can refine it over time. I'm absolutely, it's amazing. I feel like a lot of the skills and lessons I learned from the sidewalk are the things that are helping me out now.
Yeah, that in the trenches type experience. I think that's a good lesson, good take home lesson for the audience to really gather all the information you can from those experiences and don't discount anything, because those types of experiences might really shape you to who you're going to become. And speaking of magic, yeah, exactly. And speaking of magic and theater, so you actually co-founded a company earlier in your career called the Magic Mouth Theater.
Yeah, it was a blast. My best friend and I from undergrad, his name is Matthew Gutchick. He's now artistic director of the Rose Theater in Omaha, Nebraska. He's incredibly successful in the theater world. And he and I started this theater company that combined theater and magic, where magic was not so much the point as much as we wanted it to be one of the main narrative tools that we used to tell a story. Because one of my favorite things about magic is it demands, just kind of out of its very nature, the audience to be present and in the moment, because it's curiosity and wonderment. You can't be sincerely curious if you're not present in the moment. And so that was one of my favorite things about it. And we also developed an educational program that taught kids life skills through magic. If you're performing magic, you have to automatically be aware of what other people are seeing. So it's a stepping stone into empathy and perspective. And yeah, we wrote a few original plays. We won some awards. We had a great time, but we just kind of both got to the point in our lives where we realized we were going in different directions. And we're still friends to this day. I actually talked to him on the phone last night, and I tell a story about him in my keynote now. But it's, it was a great time. And it's, again, one of those things I'm just thankful that we did it.
Yeah, for sure. You dove in and did the thing. And I thought it was really cool to see. That was actually featured in Entrepreneur Magazine back in 2006. I mean, that's pretty incredible feat. You had to feel good about that coming out of school.
Yeah, that was really cool. That was really, really cool. There was, Wake Forest, it had this big it was just starting its kind of entrepreneurial wing or kind of major. And so it was giving away these kind of fellowships and scholarships every year. And Matt and I were the first two people to receive it in a single year. Up to that point, it was only one person per year, but with us, they gave it to each of us. So that was fun. So we got a fifth year in college, or as we refer to it as our victory lap.
There you go. Speaking of company founding, do you have any advice to someone who wants to pursue that, who wants to pursue starting a new company or some type of business adventure?
I'll put a little disclaimer on this. These are just things that have worked for me, things that have helped me find some modicum of success in the things that I do. I'm not by any means saying that they're gospel or that you have to do this, but the big lessons that drive me are action will always trump planning. And in everything you do, you have to balance your results and your relationships. I mean, I'm not saying that one is right and one is wrong, but they have to be balanced. And another way of saying that is you have to be competent in what you do, and you have to be likable. It's one of the things I figured out street performing. If I sit up there and I'm just telling jokes and being really, really funny and likable, people will stop for a little while, but eventually, if I don't do something, they're going to leave. On the other side of that coin, if I am performing amazing magic, but I'm just looking at my hands, I'm not talking to anyone or making eye contact, they'll leave because they'll think I'm ignoring them and just kind of playing with myself. That's the wrong term, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So you're always balancing results and relationships. And the quicker you can get your ego out of the situation, the better. In terms of, choosing what to do, I've never been a big proponent of having huge dreams. And one day I hope I'm going to be, this magician street performing guy, hopefully. I'm much more a proponent of kind of pursuing short-term goals. Because if you get too focused down the road, you might miss that shiny thing that's in the corner of your eye. And if you miss that, that could be where your real joy is. That could be where something really interesting and present in the moment is. So short-term goals, action trumps planning, balance your results in your relationships.
Yep. That's phenomenal advice. I think that it makes me think of, the research I've done on entrepreneurial type individuals. You see a lot of similar habits and traits that those individuals share. Is there some sort of secret pattern or formula, Ben, that people can use to harness some of those traits? Or, is there some type of stepwise approach that someone could take to being more successful on
absolutely.
the daily?
I think, this again, there's lots of things, but what's popping in my mind right now as you're saying this is realize that people don't connect with the best ideas, sadly.
Sure.
They connect with the ideas that are communicated the best. Communication and effective storytelling, and for me in my business, that's butter in the pan. That's what everything else is going to get cooked in, because it doesn't matter how great my service is if people don't see the value in it. Whether I am performing magic at an after dinner at a sales conference, or whether I'm delivering the first keynote for 2,000 people, at some trade show, if people can't see my value and I can't communicate it clearly, they're not going to hire me. So. Sure. Investing in communication skills, knowing how to use your voice, knowing how to use your body language, and realizing that I can do things with my hands that will invoke emotion in other people, that can cause influence. Storytelling, it's not about putting your features and your benefits first. It's about putting your emotion first and helping people connect their own dots, as opposed to simply saying, this is really good. Don't you want it? No, let me tell you about this story in this one time that's actually going to relate to something you just said. Go into it, and then help people connect their own dots. So invest in your communication skills without a doubt.
Are there any resources in particular that you've used communication skills wise, or services that you signed up for? What are some recommendations you got here for the audience?
The school at Steppenwolf. So there's the main things you want to look into your voice, because your voice is the one thing you have that everyone has, and realize that engagement. There's a difference between communicating in a way so people understand you and communicating in a way so people want to listen and want to hear more. And we obviously want to do the latter. Engagement comes from creating variety in not just the words we use, but in how we say those words. We can vary our pitch. We can vary the rate at which we talk, our volume. We can insert pauses.
There you go.
When you're consciously inserting pauses, by the way, all your uhs and ums will magically vanish. It's kind of bizarre how it happens.
Wow.
I think that, but as far as resources go, I'm reading things right now. Where's the book? It's right over here. I just picked this one up the other day and I was really excited by it. It's called Unleash the Power of Storytelling. Win Hearts, Change Minds, and Get Results by Rob Biesenbach or Basenbach. I don't know. I just picked that up on Amazon. Unleash the Power of Storytelling. That's a great one. I encourage people. Yes, there's tons of resources out there, but the best resource you have is your own kind of antenna. Be aware of the things that you engage with, and then keep a little journal. Be like, wow, that was really, why am I so drawn to that? And kind of figure out what the mechanism of that is and start applying it to the things you do in your own business. I always tell people, when we talk about humor, if you don't think a joke is funny, don't tell it. Because just because someone else can get a killer laugh with it doesn't mean you can, especially if you don't think it's funny. But if you think something is funny, tell that joke, because then that humor will naturally kind of come out on its own. A great resource I will recommend is Masterclass.
Okay.
I mean, gosh, you can find so many things on Google these days, but Masterclass, there's courses on negotiation with Chris Voss, courses on comedy with Steve Martin, acting with Dustin Hoffman, sales with Dan Pink. These are all incredible classes. And if you like cooking, Gordon Ramsay teaches an incredible rack of lamb recipe on there as well.
Wow.
But yeah, that's a solid resource.
That's great. Thanks for sharing all those, little gems there, Ben. And it brought up a question that I had. So let's say you have this great idea. Let's take in your case, you have this entertainment business, let's say, kind of just a conglomerate of all your skills. How do you go about marketing that successfully to get that in front of the people that will find the most value in it? So how can you tell that story in the most effective way? I mean, I'm talking maybe Facebook ads, Instagram ads, different types of social media platforms. I mean, maybe I'm taking the wrong angle on it with thinking that way, but share with me your thoughts there.
My thoughts on that is I agree. There's a great autobiography by Steve Martin called Born Standing Up. And he has two great quotes in there. One is, whatever you lack in talent, you can make up for with persistence. And the second one is, he was asked by a group of actors and comedians, what is the key to success? And he could tell that the answer they were looking for was like, well, you have to learn about Google AdWords, or make sure you get the right headshots, or contact this agent guy. He'll hook you up. Yeah. But the advice he gave is something I've always loved. And he simply said, you have to be so good that people cannot ignore you. So much, I've seen a lot of people, they spend so much time thinking about, how do I market myself? How do I scale? How do I put this into different revenue streams, when the reality is, make what you do better than anyone else, whether it's a product you're creating, whether it's a service you're selling. And for me, this is just me personally, I've always been a proponent of relationship marketing. My goal is always to do such a great job that at the end of every event I work, whether it's a keynote or a show or a leadership development training, that I want afterwards at least 3 to 4 people coming up to me being like, hey, can I get your business card? I think this would be great for someone I know. And if they're not doing that, I tell myself that my product is not good yet.
Sure.
And so it's a means to improve it. I think that, and that's another little side note, I've never understood people with business cards who would go to a networking event and brag about how many business cards they gave away. If you're going to the bar to pick someone up, you don't brag the fact that, hey, there's this really hot girl at the end of the bar, man. I took my phone number and I handed it to her. Who cares? We care when you get their number, because now you can kind of get them into, I hate this word, but your sales funnel. Sure. So it's more about getting other people's information so you can then follow up and start building a relationship. I also think that success in these things, it is a crock pot. It is not a microwave. I think that you have to be a human first. People have to like you. And then once they like you and they know that you like them, that's when you can actually start talking about business. I think that too many people, like I said, lead with features and benefits as opposed to telling good emotional stories and getting to know one another. I think there's a basic level of competency that, if someone's hiring a subcontractor, they have to meet that level of competency because they have to get the job done. But beyond that, people work with who they like, and they work with whoever's the easiest to work with. And so those are two big factors that we have to consider in everything we do. I don't know if that answered your question as the way you wanted it to.
That's a phenomenal answer to that question. And I've got a kind of a building block off of that question.
Absolutely.
And that really focuses on niching down. And when you have that, like, let's say, I've heard some other people say that have had created successful podcasts or businesses. They say you want to create the content that you enjoy, first and foremost, so that you have motivation to continue doing it. But you also want to create content that provides value to your audience. And you want to focus most of your efforts on just producing quality content before you really try to scale it. But in order to do that type of, value production for your audience, you probably got to niche down. If you want to have the best podcast out there, I mean, like this podcast I'm running right now, a success podcast, entrepreneur podcast, there's a ton of them out there. How can I, for example, niche down to become the best in a smaller space, so to speak?
Right now, I would say, 'cause how many of these have you done?
This will be episode 12.
Episode 12. So I'm going to tell you a story.
Let's go.
There is going right back. There was a magician by the name of Jay Marshall, probably one of the greatest magicians that no one's ever heard of. And this guy worked vaudeville. He's an old timer. He passed away, sadly, in around 2000, I want to say 5 or 6.
Okay.
But there's a great story. Hold on, I'm going to grab a deck of cards here.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is going to be a video that people can see or not, but you can. Can you see the cards where they are now?
I can, yeah.
So there's a move in Magic, and I'll show it to you very quickly. So you see the Queen of Spades there, yeah?
Yep.
Just give it a little shake, and it changes into a different card.
There you go.
Now that move is
Four hearts.
It's called the double lift. I don't think I'm going to be going to magician hell for giving this away. There's a way that you can, with a lot of practice, turn 2 cards over so it looks like one and actually have a different card there. So someone went up to Jay Marshall because they were working on their double lift. And they said, Jay, I'm really happy with this double lift. I've done everything you've told me to as far as the mechanics and where my hands go. Can I show it to you? And he shows it to Jay. And Jay goes, it's not too bad. Well, how do I fix it? And Jay said, do it about another 10,000 times and then bring it back and show it to me. And awesome. The lesson there is sometimes you just have to make the road by walking it.
Sure.
I would say, especially if you're a content creator, first off, buy the book Thought Leadership by, or I think it's called, it's not Thought Leadership, Thought Leader by Matt Church. Get that book.
Okay. All right.
Read a essay by Robert Kelly called, I think it's called A Loyal Thousand Fans. And then do podcasts. Just do a lot of them. And the more you do them and you start building your audience, you'll start hearing from your audience because they'll respond to you about what they like and what they don't like. And the things they like, improve. And the things they don't like, stop doing.
Yeah.
And let it evolve on its own. And of course, always putting your own input and your own thought into it and bringing your own perspective. But I think so many people want the, what's the button or the switch that I flip so I can just be successful? And the reality is anything worth having, anything that's going to be meaningful is going to take reps. It's going to take stripes. I think it was Malcolm Gladwell said that in his book Outliers that the reason the Beatles were so successful is because of how many bad shows they played in Hamburg that no one ever saw. And that most people who were outliers at some point put 10,000 hours into whatever their craft is.
Yeah.
I'm probably butchering what Malcolm Gladwell actually said, but I think the sentiment is there.
Yeah. No, yeah, that is extremely useful advice, and I appreciate you showing that card trick here. And for those of you listening to the audio that couldn't see it, there will be something posted for you online. And Ben, I would actually, I want to ask you, are you surprised to know that I can actually do what I call a decent double lift?
Can you show it to me?
I can.
I would love to see that.
I can. We'll do it after the recording here.
After the recording.
There you go.
Deal. I want to see it.
That's
maybe you can give me advice on mine. I very rarely do that move.
There you go. Yeah. Actually, I am somewhat of an amateur card trick magician myself. I think it is one of the major reasons that my fiance is now my fiance. Both that and knowing how to solve a Rubik's Cube. So those are two things she thought was really cool. There you go. Yeah. Are those foam AirPods you got behind you too? Is that?
Oh, that's a big AirPod. It's
there you go.
Spoiler alert, I use that in my keynotes and my shows.
I like it. You probably hear pretty good on those. So Ben, we've talked a little bit about marketing and how to, harness, your skill set in terms of how you can provide value to an audience as an entertainer, how you can potentially niche down with your craft by utilizing reps. And I want to ask you the question, you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier possibly, but what is your personal definition of success? Earlier, you said some things that, some other people might think it is, whether it's money, fame, certain types of, people know you type thing. But how do you define that word?
There's a Maya Angelou quote. So Maya Angelou I was actually so lucky. She lived in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, 2 blocks away from the college that I went to. And once every 3 years, she would go there and teach a poetry class to just, 30 random kids. And I got to be in that class. It was dumb luck that I got in. So I'll throw it up here on the screen real quick. But yeah, that is me before I knew anything about how to style my own hair. with Dr. Angelou, but she was a gold mine of just gold, and everything she said was wonderful. She said success is liking yourself, liking what you do, and liking how you do it. And that's good enough for me.
Yeah.
I think that work-life balance plays a part in that. And I said, like I said earlier, it's about results and relationships. And for me, having meaningful relationships in all facets of my life, I get a great deal of joy from that. I don't just have clients, I have friends. And I think this is a big part of, I think this is important to business. I think Zig Ziglar said, if you help, you can have anything you want in life if you help enough people get what they want. And so I am constantly like keeping track of people. What are their interests? What are they working on? What are their struggles, their obstacles? What are they passionate about? And not just, what's their title? What business they work at? What's their cell phone and their LinkedIn address? I keep track of everything, dogs, birthdays, and spouses. And if I see someone, I'm like, oh, wow, these two people, they both love Bruce Springsteen. And there's this really cool concert happening. I think it was the inauguration this year. Bruce Springsteen was playing. I sent them both a link and was like, hey, all three of us here, we love Bruce Springsteen. I just thought I'd send you this link. And tell me what you think of it afterwards. And we did. And it didn't turn into any work right then, but it will down the road. I know that when those two people need a service that I offer, that they'll think of me because I do things like that.
Yep. And you're making that personal connection. And I think if, as a person receiving that from someone, maybe they had their last interaction with you was quite a while ago, that really feels cool to think, wow, like they remembered that minute detail that maybe I only mentioned one time in passing conversation. So it makes them feel valued. And yeah, you're helping them, pursue their passions by sharing the love of Bruce Springsteen there. That's great.
Yeah. It's a habit that mind readers have because, like I said, we're not actually psychic, but we keep track of a lot of stuff that people have no idea we keep track of. And I just kind of took that skill and put it in my everyday life.
Yeah. So you define success, what success means to you, lining up with Dr. Angelou there. The backbone of my show, what I'm really trying to find out across the board is what keeps people driven towards chasing success. So the backbone of my show, really find out any successful person, what makes their inner clock tick. So Ben, what is the one single driving force that keeps your inner clock ticking towards success?
I want to figure out and become the best version of myself so I can have a positive impact on people. I'm a people person. It's one of my, it's just in my DNA. It's not anything I had to learn. I just get it. I love people. I like connecting with people, and I want to be the best version of myself. And the kind of fuel on top of that fire is I am viciously curious and I have a strong desire to learn. The other side of that coin is I very rarely have ego in being right. I'm more the kind of person that will, when there's conflict, I will bring us back to our values and the things that everybody has in common so we can get going in the same direction together. But yeah, I want to be the best version of myself so I can have a positive impact on the people I care about. And that's everybody. I'm trying to be. There's a few assholes out there. But for the most part, I try to care about everyone and give everyone a fair shake.
Yeah, and that helps when you're performing, I'm sure, keeping eye contact and keeping people engaged and making people feel valued and being there, that you, not only are you performing for them, but like you actually care that they're there and that they are, they formed an audience for you. So I think that's a really cool piece.
Yeah, and we can take it a notch above that because my shows, in my opinion, started when I was a street performer and I brought it into my kind of the corporate arena. My shows started getting a lot more positive feedback when I started bringing people out of the audience and making them the stars of the show. So yes, I'm doing the heavy lifting, but the reality is I want all the applause for the person that's on the stage because the reality is they're taking a much bigger risk than I am. I've done this thousands of times. This might be their first and only time ever on stage. So how can I make them look like a rock star? Because what that demonstrates is shared values. The audience sees that I am taking care of and valuing one of their own, which is going to make them more apt to bring me kind of into their community and like me more. And yeah,
that's empowering.
Absolutely.
And, so you clearly have a high, amount of value that you place on relationships, but Can you narrow down at what point in your life you knew you wanted to be an entrepreneur? You knew you wanted to, kind of go off on your own. I know currently, for the audience here, if you haven't read his bio, benwhiting.com, you can read all about him there. He's currently got a consulting firm that he helps, kind of drive the mission that he's been talking about. But yeah, at what point, Ben, did you think you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
I never really thought I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but there was a certain point in my life where I noticed a lot more people were calling me one. So I just kind of took up the mantle. I think for initially, I was in acting school. I wanted to be an actor, but I needed money. So I started street performing. And then the street performing, kind of progressed on its own because, the last kind of real piece of advice Jim Cellini gave me was get off the sidewalk. He's like, because he passed away at the age of 69 and he looked like he was 80. He was an amazing human being, but you could tell the sidewalk just kind of weathered him. And he told me, Ben, get off the sidewalk, get into the corporate market, whatever the next level is, find it. And I've always done that. And I'm doing that to this day. I'm always trying to find whatever the next level is for me. So it went from sidewalks to house parties to country clubs to holiday parties to corporate events to sales conferences to trade shows to cruise ships. And then I felt like the next level was keynote speaking. Like, how can I have more of an impact? And so then I started bringing my theater career into play and teaching people presentation skills, helping my clients develop their keynotes. Out of that, I developed a keynote of my own, and always take risk. Always put yourself out there. Like I said, action trumps planning. And I think it was Ross Perot who had the phrase ready, fire, aim, which I always kind of like. Yeah. So I applied for a TED Talk with a title, having no idea what I was actually going to say. And they picked it up. And so I was like, oh, well, I guess I better write this thing. So Connect Like a Mind Reader, my first like little mini 8-minute TED Talk, that got picked up. And from there was a woman in the audience who saw me, who had a leadership development firm of her own. And her and I started talking. And initially I was going to help them kind of make their content more engaging. But after working with her for a few months, they just hired me. And I worked there for 4 or 5 years before I went out on my own. And now I'm like trying to think of, well, what's the next level? And all the while, I'm still doing shows. My shows went from, corporate entertainment to, theater shows. And now I have a residency at a resort close to where I live and working at a casino as well. And so I just always am kind of open to wherever life takes me. And because when you engage constantly with curiosity and a desire to learn, a desire to get better. You mentioned my setup in here, this virtual setup. I didn't know what soft light was this time last year. I didn't know what an f-stop was on a lens or what the difference between a cardio microphone and just an omnidirectional one was. These are all things I learned because I don't like sitting around. I get bored very easily, and I knew I wanted to pivot my business virtually. And so these are all things I'm constantly learning. I can feel myself going onto a tangent as I hear myself talk, but I hope that answered your question as far as entrepreneurship goes.
No, that's perfect. I really love the piece that action trumps planning. I think that really hits home for me. I feel like that could be a message, to hang up in my studio here. If you're curious about doing something, rather than sitting around and talking about it and thinking about all these steps that you have to do it, by just doing it. I mean, if someone has a desire to start a podcast or something, just try to record an intro for a show you think might sound cool with the title and get some feedback from friends or something and see how that goes. Better off, doing that rather than sitting for 3 months or something thinking about what would work and trying to do a market analysis. And it's just really inspiring to hear, you say that action before
and don't get me wrong. And there's a great book on that kind of whole idea, The 5-Second Rule by Mel Robbins. It's fantastic. But another really, really big part of this whole equation that I would be remiss if I didn't mention is self-forgiveness, because you're going to fail a lot. And especially in 2020 and 2021, I'll be honest, there are days I slept until 10. I knew exactly what I needed to do to get the day done, and I just sat on the couch and didn't do it. And is that going to help my business? No. But I also know that if I beat myself up over it, that's not going to help anything else either. So a big part of this, there's a great, I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you. If you've ever wanted to write anything, one of the best essays on writing was written by Ann Patchett, and it's called The Getaway Car. And what I love about she says is, our ideas are not in the same part of our brain that understand words. She says the best part of a book is before she's written anything down. And it's just a feeling.
Wow.
The feeling you get when you think of, man, when this podcast lands it, I'm going to feel this in my chest. It's going to be great. People are going to be inspired. And she's like, the best part of a book is that moment when the book is just a butterfly in her imagination. The hard part is when you actually have to pluck the butterfly out of the air, put it on a piece of paper, and stab it to death with a pen and try and write something. Because that transition, that going from the emotional to the right here in my hand, that's the journey. That's the craft. And you only gain that craft by just repetition over and over. But like I said, yes, action trumps planning. Done is better than perfect. A lot of people, I think use perfectionism to hide. The same way people use procrastination to hide. The reality is it's not that it has anything to do with, I have to work out in the gym. The reality is probably you have self-doubt and you're using procrastination to hide. So I would say, forgive yourself when things don't work out. Don't beat yourself up, but always get back on the saddle.
That's great. That's great advice. And I do remember reading you're passionate about writing plays, and you had a few that received some awards, and you're currently working on your 6th play, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a few things in the drawer right now. I'm actually right now
Awesome.
I'm always working on. Right now, there's an adaptation of The Tempest that's just a passion project I love, written by William Shakespeare. Right now, there's a theater company that wants me to write an adaptation of The Velveteen Rabbit, that we're still kind of in the really early discussions of that. And I personally am working on my own book about the principles of mind reading and how they can be applied to everyday life and business. So,
yeah.
And that, by the way, that book, I've been working on that for like 6 years. I have jot notes. I have pages. I have all this stuff. I have half of a proposal. It's a hot mess. But the point is, keep working on this stuff. Forgive yourself and don't stop. You miss all the shots that you don't take.
That's right. That's great advice for everyone listening. And specifically about the writing process, if someone was thinking and listening right now and saying, hey, I want to write a short story or a book, let's say they have the baseline idea. They've got that hammered out. What's the logical next step for them? As they get pen to paper, as they get typing on their Word document.
Everyone writes
words per day.
Yeah. Everyone writes differently. I think one of the best pieces of advice, again, it comes right out of The Getaway Car, written by Ann Patchett. Set aside 1 hour, 2 hours a day for a week, and put your butt in the chair and do not let yourself do anything else other than write. You can sit there and do absolutely nothing, but you will not do anything other than write. And if you do that for a month, and at the end of the month you don't have any pages, maybe writing is not your thing. And that's okay. That's totally fine. But at a certain point, you want to get to this kind of precipice, this edge where the act of not writing has now become more stressful than the act of writing. And when you kind of make that flip, then you just get it down on paper. Everyone's style is different. Some people like outlines. Some people like to freeform. Some people, I know someone who says when they have a hard time starting the writing process, they will open up a doc and just tap the top gibberish on the keyboard. But the action of the fingers on the keys eventually gets them in the mindset where they start writing something, which turns into a sentence, which turns into a paragraph, which turns into an essay or a book.
Before you know it, you might have a bestseller.
You never know. You never know.
You never know. Well, Ben, it's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed listening and learning from you. I know the audience has got to be thinking, wow, there's a lot of things that I have to read after this, which I think is great. I need a lot more things to read too. But really, thank you so much for the time.
Yeah, and I will give you one more book that I always love to recommend. It's called...
Let's hear it.
It's by an author named Donald Miller, Building a Story Brand. And it's how do you take what it is you do, what it is you're passionate about, create a story around it that can eventually become your elevator pitch, your website front page, all these things that you need, your proposals. Building a Story Brand, it's a really, really powerful book that I read probably about 3 years ago, and it's one I recommend all the time. And it's great for entrepreneurs because we have to rely so much on our own ability to tell our own story and convey our own value.
Really appreciate that, and put that on my list too. That sounds great. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Ben Whiting. I know that you've probably got something else to do tonight and get back to working on the next piece of your entertainment business. And Appreciate all
gin
your
and
insight.
tonic, but yeah, that sounds great.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. I might have a beer as well.
There you go. Eric, man, this has been an absolute blast. If there's ever anything I can do for you, I hope you won't hesitate to reach out.
Most definitely. Right back at you, sir.
All right.
Take care, Ben.
You too, bud.
All right. Thank you.